Welcome to Close Listening. I'm Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. The album we're talking about today is called There's a Riot Going On. This is by a group called Sly and the Family Stone, and this is an album I've been meaning to listen to for years. I think it was in May 2016 that I read Grail Marcus's collection of essays, Mystery Train, and one of the bands he chose to document as an interesting and important contribution to American popular music history was Sly and the Family Stone. And I can't remember the details of the essay, it's too long now, but one of the albums he inevitably talked about a lot was this one, There's a Riot Going On, because it was seen as this big political break, this turn away from sort of happy, hippie 1960s stuff to more militant political music. And when you read a little bit about this album, and I can't say I found a ton, but there's some suggestion that Sly Stone's increasing connections with the Black Panther Party were a big inspiration behind this record. And while it wasn't necessarily favorably reviewed at the time of its release, it's come to be quite influential. When I listened to it, there were certainly some songs I enjoyed, but unfortunately, I often found myself reacting in a kind of I don't get it way. Like, it wasn't ever a reaction of I don't like this stuff, but it didn't seem very political or unusual at all to me. And I think this is a case of you had to be there. So prior to this, my exposure to Sly and the Family Stone would have been listening a couple times to like greatest hits albums and, not particularly frequently. I think the effect of this album would have really stood out if one listened to it when it first came out in 1971, and one listened to it if one was gradually listening to the various Sly and the Family Stone albums, because I think its effect is not so much in its lyrics. Its politics, insofar as they are any, are really understated. Rather, you're supposed to hear the musical difference between this album and the previous ones. The songs are not obviously angry, but there's more of a focus on a bassy sound and also a more emphatic rhythm created by the mixing of real drums with drum machines. I also have the sense that the funk sound of this record, though it to my ears just comes across as a fairly common part of the modern musical scene, I think it counted as really innovative at the time it was released, which would have made this record seem much stranger and more provocative at the time. Now, I don't really know if that holds up. James Brown's music obviously predates this, but maybe a lot of other funk music would have come slightly later. So anyway, that's the context of this record. Let's talk about the songs on here. This one opens with a track called Feel So Good. Now, this one strikes me as more of a jam than a song. And when you hear a comment like that from me, that's kind of a negative comment. It implies the song just sounds sort of like musicians owning their craft together in the studio without having a vision for like a final product. That said, this is a fairly enjoyable jam. There's just something very complete about the sound. The mixing of that very funky bass with the sort of richness of the backup singing. The lead singing is a bit muted, and that is a running theme through this record. It's not something I love, but I wonder if there could be some meaning there. Like the muted singing is kind of suggesting Sly Stone going through his disillusion phase. Track number 2 is called Just Like a Baby. This one is kind of a mixture between old time blues with more of a spaced out 1960s feel. This song serves as a representative of the politics of the whole album. On the one hand, they are rudimentary politics, but that's because Sly Stone sees himself as in a period of rebirth. He's trying to engage with this angrier, more militant part of the left and the civil rights movement. Track number 3 is called Poet. It's also kind of weird in its delivery. The only lyric you hear again and again is I'm a songwriter. So it feels like it kind of makes its one point. If you're a songwriter, you have the potential to contribute to discourse, maybe even political discourse, but it just feels like a rough idea. There's not much out there. Now, that said, track number 4 is really cool. It's called Family Affair. So this is the first song on here that sounds like a fully developed song, and it's made effective by Sly Stone's very gravelly, yet at the same time very clear vocal delivery. The song's first verse talks about two siblings, one who's a star student and one who's more of a troubled child. You hear that line and you instantly think, oh, this is one of these sociology type songs. It's one of these, how did we fail the troubled child? But no, it stops there and it says they love each other. They're both loved because they're part of the same family, and family starts to stick together. So maybe this is like a statement of Black nationalism, or maybe it's just about the importance of family in general. Sly and the Family Stone was a band that represented itself as a family of members had stage names where they were something Stone. But at the same time as this album was being recorded, the original Sly and the Family Stone lineup was having internal tensions. Sly's original drummer, Greg Errico, for example, leaves the band midway through this project. So I don't know what's really going on there, but I think kind of like their earlier hit, Everyday People, this sort of shows the uniqueness of the Sly and the Family Stone sound in a best way. It doesn't quite have the same flow as other melodies. It feels like it's little spoken ideas, but the vocals are very clear and they're at an appropriate volume, and it's an interesting, unusual sound. So, Family Affair, first real success on the album for me. Track number 5 is an interesting one. It's called Africa Talks to You, The Asphalt Jungle. The singing on the song is performed in a more of a choral manner, so it certainly has a distinct sound. Its most provocative lyric is a reference to a lazy, as in like a person being called a lazy, as if lazy is like some kind of slur. Now, maybe Sly is just talking about himself because another part of the context of this album, in addition to these very militant motivated politics, was struggles with the use of drugs like cocaine and PCP. So maybe there's a lot of self deprecation going on here. Or it could also be a bold political statement, a sort of expression of solidarity with people who are dismissed as lazies by society, the homeless and otherwise downtrodden. Track number 7, Brave and Strong, brings back that muted vocal feel. And the lyrics are pretty minimal. If it's saying something, maybe it's just, there aren't very many people you can trust. Track 8 is another interesting one. It's called You Caught Me Smiling. This is a relatively happy yet mysterious song. It's right on the verge between sounding melodic and sounding more ad-libby, just, throwing in statements. I feel like the melody of the chorus really works at making the song a hit, and then the more ad-lib quality of the verses gives it its more political personality. Sly Stone's voice howls while he's singing the lyrics on the verse, and yet these lyrics are openly disempowering. It won't take you long to climb a tree around me. So, as if he's, again, as I said with song number 2, Just Like a Baby, he's trying to birth a new political identity, a new musical identity from his feelings of disempowerment at the moment. Maybe he has his troubles, maybe he's overwhelmed by his usage of certain drugs, but maybe in this weakness, he can identify with the downtrodden members of our society and build something out of that. Track number 9 is called Time. This is a mellowed out track and it seems to be a bit of a meditation. So if songs like Just Like a Baby and You Caught Me Smiling are implying the singer is in a disempowered state, this one is saying, okay, I'm in a disempowered state now, but time will pass and I will come out of it. Bears hibernate and then they reemerge as bears. There's specifically a lyric about bears. That's why I used that metaphor. Track number 10 is called Spaced Cowboy. And this is an interesting one because the main thing you notice in it is cowboy style yodeling mixed in with what otherwise doesn't really sound like cowboy music. It's also a fun song in terms of some of the individual lyrics. There's a line that goes, I was on my last leg, couldn't borrow my friend's extra peg. But again, the vocals are quite muted. So, you have to be reading the lyrics while you're listening to really catch them. Track number 11 is another great one. It's called Running Away. Lyrically, again, it's quite minimalist, but it has a great little pop horns thing going on. It has a 70s sweetness to it. And yet, despite the sweetness, it has, some of the more negative lyrics on the album. Unlike the song Time, which suggested that the singer would reemerge after this period of feeling disempowered, Running Away suggests being caught in a permanent cycle of escapism. Track number 12 is called Thank You for Talking to Me, Africa. So I said in my introduction to this video, I feel like my mistake was listening to this album first. Maybe I would appreciate how revolutionary, how militant it was if I, listened to the previous 4 Sly and the Family Stone and saw the contrast. And that would have particularly helped with this one. Thank You for Talking to Me, Africa, I quickly noticed is the same as an earlier Sly and the Family Stone song, Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself. Now, I know the title of that earlier song. I don't have any particular memories of hearing it, but I know it's one of their important songs. And it seems like the concept here is that they take the original song and slow it down. So it's like an eerie, haunted version, as if Sly is saying, I once used to be this happy singer, and now I'm kind of in this dark state. But if you listen to the song outside of that context, I mean, all you hear is a funky sounding song and this seemingly upbeat chorus. Thank you for letting me be myself. Then you take the time to look at the lyrics, and regardless of whether you're listening to the more upbeat earlier version or this current version, the lyrics are quite provocative. There's a reference to a fight with the devil, which is a common image in gospel music. Yet this doesn't seem to be a religious song. It's not saying, I once was in the devil's arms, but now I was in Jesus's arms. Rather, it's saying, I once was in the devil's arm, and now I'm in my arms. And it's interesting that this same message can seemingly transcend Sly Stone's various mental and political states. Later in the song, there's a reference to the one thing you don't want to be in life is a sellout. And I guess regardless of whether you're a happy hippie or a more pessimistic Black nationalist, I guess you have a common enemy in the corporate sellouts. So maybe I'm missing something with this record by not listening to it, A, in its historical moment, and B, fifth in my Sly and the Family Stone journey rather than first. But maybe there's something interesting in the fact that this is both a very political and not at all political album. So I didn't mention that there's actually a track listed on some versions of this album called There's a Riot Going On, which lasts for 0 seconds. And I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, but supposedly Sly Stone said the reason why that song did not run at all is because he didn't actually want to riot. I also have this alternative cover for the CD here, but the original album had a slightly updated version of the American flag, where if you're not looking closely, it just looks like the American flag, but actually Sly Stone changed the blue to black to represent American diversity, and he changed the stars to suns because he saw it as a brighter image. So on the one hand, there are these stories about him entering this more pessimistic, more militant political state, but there also seems to be all kinds of signs of hippie things. And furthermore, when you listen to these songs, they don't really have specific political messaging. It sounds more like a man struggling to find himself. And the fact that all these things could be true at once speaks to the complexity of real world political identities. All sorts of people can claim to have strong political beliefs, but at the end of the day, we're just individual people. Like, even if you're a successful musician, your political power only goes so far. John Lennon or Roger Waters weren't able to bring their political visions to power in the world either, as influential as cultural figures as they are. So certainly an interesting historical document. And in terms of pure enjoyment, there are certainly some songs on here I would cite: Running Away, You Caught Me Smiling, and Family Affair. So let me know your thoughts, any other interpretations you have on this album in the comments below. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.